Yep.
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Provost of the Nazarbayev University, Professor Adesida, Mr. Dean of the Graduate School of the Public Policy of the Nazarbayev University, Professor Tatwi, Professor Xenaios, honored professors, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to thank the university, Nazarbayev University, to grant me the privilege to chair this panel aimed at addressing possible ways toward a water-secure and sustainable recovery from the today's situation resulting from the sanitary, socio-economic challenges resulting from the COVID crisis. As you know, the COVID crisis sharply highlighted the institutional and socio-economic strength and weakness worldwide, including Central Asia. It highlighted inequalities still persisting in terms of water, sanitation, hygiene access, but also evidences the cross linkage between all the sustainable goals and all the aspects of economy and access. Water is at heart of the Central Asian economy. It is urgent to address the challenges of systemic water resource management at the river basin level as advocated by SDG 6.5. Government of the regions are under pressure to provide response measures to recover from the current crisis, be on the socio-economic part, be on the sanitary part, but also to adopt a more long-term approach by building more resilience to impeding for future shocks that may come. Addressing food security, energy security, sanitary security, and climate change is and will remain high on the agendas of the countries, having one prerequisite: a water secure and sustainable, stable Central Asia. Today we will address those questions. We have an online panel gathering 6 distinguished panelists, whom I will introduce in a moment, representing key stakeholders of the water, food, energy, and socio-economic nexus, including the peace nexus. The development partner side and the financial side is represented by the World Bank, by USAID, by the European Union. The academic side is represented by the Corvinus University and, of course, by the Nazarbayev University. Finally, the regional side is represented by the International Fund of Saving RLC, by the Executive Office. First of all, before introducing all the panelists, we have a very interesting presentation of Professor Xenaios of the GSPP, the Public Policy Program of the Nazarbayev University, and with Dr. André Verly, the Regional Water Advisor of the Swiss Corporation in Central Asia. They will set us the scene for us toward the water secure and sustainable recovery. I will give you the word very soon, and then you have sessions with questions and answers with the panelists, and each panelist will have the opportunity to present his point. So please, Professor Xenaios and Dr. Verly, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bermin, and I would just like to give a brief outline. By the way, I hope that I'm heard well in here with all the technical kind of challenges we face. So the presentation, it will be a short outline about the water secure and sustainable recovery that, as you said, is going to be co-shared and presented by me and Dr. André Verly. We can go next slide, please. Yep. Can we go to the next? Yep. Okay. Yeah. So we all know that the water in Central Asia is quite interactive and complex. On the right-hand side, we have a map here that you see, for instance, the interconnectivity between Amu Darya and Sir Darya. You're quite aware that these 2 rivers are composing the Aral basin mainly, and we have different also rain-fed or snow-fed or even ice-fed rivers. We have canals, inland. We have a very high kind of complicacy. That's a legacy from Soviet Union, but it's sustained even up to today. And we all acknowledge that we need a transboundary water management that has been stated since the independence in 1991. All the states know that the cost of inaction, no cooperating, is higher, and we will mention that later on by Andre. It's higher than the cost of action and cooperation. There is a long-standing commitment and support to the Central Asian water states by multi-partners. We are very lucky, and thanks a lot. We have one of the most influential partners here with our panel. The SDG regarding the water remains an area of great concern in Central Asia. And what we are asking for is a stronger coordination and cooperation by external actors under the guidance, of course, of the Central Asian states, because we all know that the Central Asian states, they want that they are better sense what is the need for improving their water resource management approach here. Next, please. Yep. So this is just to give a very glimpse of how complicated Central Asia is from a study in 2017, relatively pretty recent. It's one of the biggest areas with inner drainage. So the rivers do not come up to an open sea or something like that. So it goes more to lakes or to inland kind of areas. And this is with the region of inner drainage is with the gray shade, while with the red shade you reach the region of extreme water stress. This comes a lot in the downstream countries, in the lowland countries, and we have also with the dust line the region of extreme anomaly. That has to do with the temperatures that comes quite a lot of difference between day and night. So we know that there is an area with steppes and deserts, but on the other hand we have glaciers and as well as big mountains ranges over 5,000 meters like Tian Shan and Pamir mountains. Yep. Can we go next, please? So I will show you some hints from a study we did in Nazarbayev University, and that was just somehow to try to approach water security in Central Asia. We try somehow to trace it through 5 main pillars: the urban and household facilities that has to do, as we mentioned, sanitation and hygiene, SDG and treatment making, natural hazards that deals with landslides, floods, droughts, and avalanches, environmental aspects related to river basins and mountain conservation, as well as lake ecosystems and the broader ecosystem conservation. Of course, the economic activities are the main pillar of this water security, and that's to say that it's irrigation systems, hydropower, energy, water for industry, and the web nexus, of course. And last but not least, the water governance. That's a bit overlooked in the region and has to do with administrative policy aspects as well, legislative aspects. Of course, as you see, I mean, this is very difficult to distinguish and very clear kind of differentiation between the five components. That's why the overlap, but we somehow try to trace these in 5, let's say, kind of distinct pillars. Next, can you go to next, please? And in the next slide, I would like to show you the interest of people living, I mean, not only in Central Asia, but abroad on water security. What you see with the blue curve that goes upward in a bit exponential manner, you see how many studies have been done from 1997 to 2019. The rate of the studies that has been done for water security aspects is nearly exponential in Central Asia. In the other lines, the purple, the red, and the yellow, you see the global increase of all the research and the literature all over the world. So even with the highest estimate, it's 9% the global increase of the research altogether. While the research for water security nowadays, it goes 15.7%. That's to say that people outside of Central Asia, they're quite interested about water security and all these components we're dealing with today. Thanks. Yeah, please, you can go next. And the forward slides is about, again, the same study. Of course, it is a small sample, but tells something that we have a different perception between practitioners, policymakers, and scientific community. For instance, the practitioners and policymakers seems to prioritize a lot the economic activities of water security, and next the urban household, further natural hazards, and fourth the environmental aspects. While in terms of the scientific community and the scholars and the literature review, it seems that the environment is mostly prioritized. Of course, related to economics, but it's mostly the environmental and river basin management on the ecological point of view that it's stressed out. And then it's the economies, then it's natural hazards, and fourth is the urban household. And talking about, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, talking now about the economics. Of course, we all know that this is a cornerstone of what we talk about and how we further develop water resources management. This is just a hint, as a slide for East-West Institute, just to give an outline of Amu Darya. That's 2,600 kilometers, and it's one with Sidaria as the second tributary to Aral Basin. It is like 18 times the size of Belgium. It's a huge basin, and we have a lot of issues with the delta and a lot of loss in terms of water in the delta area. We all know that it has a great potential in terms of hydropower that is exercised nowadays. And of course, there's a lot of relevance of this river basin with hazards, especially upstream with Kyrgyzstan and with Tajikistan. And further on, we acknowledge that it's a huge relevance with the agriculture, like 3% of the basin countries, and moreover with the employability. So how many people are employed in agriculture because of the water coming from Amudarya? So all in all, this study, for instance, gave a rough estimate that about $1.75 billion could come out of like better management of the Amudarya. Now I'm handing over to Andre for getting further with the presentation. The next slide.
Thank you very much, Stefanos. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, in this part of the presentation, we would now like to highlight some of the key issues towards water security in Central Asia from our perspective. And just remember what Professor Xenarios just said, the perception is very, very different. So I'm just presenting how, well, some of the key lights of how we see the key issues. First, it is, I think, very evident that water is a key factor for sustainable economic development in the region of Central Asia. And the last slide has actually already highlighted some aspects of that. And while that might be uncontested in general, we also know by now that Central Asia does not really unleash its potential. This is a graph that is based on the work from the World Bank, which evidences that Kazakhstan is not doing so well in getting the best out of its water. And we also, Switzerland, have commissioned a study in 2017 where we realized that the potential is really, the untapped potential is really huge. We came up with a figure of about 4.5 billion USD a year, which the countries could basically earn to some extent if they would improve their water management. Next slide, please. And a second issue is water governance. And if you take a definition as the one that is stated on the slide, a set of social relations or a system that determines who gets what water and what services, when and how, it is already from this definition pretty evident that you have to work on several levels, that you have to improve capacities on all levels and also foster a participatory process. And a lot has been done to that respect in the last couple of years or maybe even decades here in Central Asia, but we have to become better also in learning from each other how to transfer, for example, good practices from small scale, from pilots to a larger scale, to identify the key success factors, but also to point out to roadblocks. And one thing that is for sure, we have to think beyond the water community. These two issues are particularly important to tackle further and future challenges. Next slide, please. And one of these challenges are the demographic trends in Central Asia. We know that the trend is upwards, and it's quite obvious that this will have a very direct link to the per capita availability of natural resources, including water. Next slide, please. Another very important challenge is, of course, climate change. It's a looming game changer, and the map just illustrates some of the issues that might come up with climate change and also demographic changes. And for the semi-arid region of Central Asia, that these changes are likely to include more extreme temperatures. We already had in the last couple of years some days which had temperatures that are not really common, not even for Central Asia, where we know that we have very nice and warm summers. We are most certainly having lower water quantities, but which might even be more important, we're going to have a shift in the water runoff from periods where we really need it for agriculture to periods where it's just basically running off without the big use. Next slide, please. A third issue that I would like to highlight, apart from water as a key factor for economic development and water governance, is an issue that is linked to water quality, and then, of course, also to the transboundary character that is imminent to the issue of water quality. Again, the World Bank has published recently a report which highlighted that bad water quality can slow down economic growth. So again, when we are talking about water quality, we end up in economics, and that is really relevant. So at the end of the day, we are still talking about money. And in Central Asia, unfortunately, there are multiple threats to water quality, including the uranium tailings, pesticides, sewage, but also climate change, which might reduce water quantity. And with that, you get an increased load of pollutions in the remaining water. So it is evident that this is also, again, a looming hazard. But at the same time, we realize that the water quality is not yet very high on the agenda in the region. And it really calls for a stronger transboundary cooperation between the countries. There are some bits which are emerging. There is a regional working group on water quality. There is now a bilateral working group between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan on that issue. But there is certainly room for more. So one could say that with these key issues I just mentioned and also the challenges, there is already pretty much on the plate. So that is probably enough for a lifetime. But next slide, please. As we know, all of us, unfortunately, then came COVID-19, and that virus has basically taken the entire floor, and it has changed quite a lot of our normal way of doing business. It became, for example, evident that WASH is critical for in the context of water security. WASH meaning water supply, water sanitation, and hygiene. It is a key issue. It will be a key issue, and it's certainly also a key issue in Central Asia. And Mr. Bonvin has already mentioned at the very beginning, the COVID crisis has also reinforced certain trends, and it has certainly made the lives of each and every one of us more difficult and more challenging. Next slide, please. So if there is one thing that we should have noticed by now, then it's certainly that there's going to be hopefully soon a new normal, but certainly not the old normal. So basically that means that business as usual will not be an option anymore. We also think that stationary is dead. The answers from the past will not be enough for the future. So you cannot just go back to your colleagues or to your senior colleagues, to your grandfather and ask for hints how to tackle a problem, because the problems are getting more and more complex. And as bad as the COVID crisis has really been so far already, we also could see it as kind of a game changer, which hopefully induces changes for the better, for a building back better. And as I have already mentioned in the presentation so far, we think that some key ingredients are certainly the economic narrative. Water has a value, and that needs to be understood by each and everyone. I'm not talking about a price for water, but about a value for water. Water governance and the systemic approach, including water supply and sanitation, are certainly key. And obviously, all actions need to be climate proof. They need to be fit for a future that looks different in terms of climate parameters from the situation that we know now. It has to be built on sound information, and it has to include, or to be actually also built upon, a strong transboundary cooperation, which has and follows and uses the regional setup, the right institutional setup. And of course, platforms such as the Blue Peace Dialogue platform that is coming out of our Blue Peace Central Asia project can help here, but at the end of the day, it's in the hand of the countries, of the nations of Central Asia to make a difference. Next slide. So how can we take the way forward? How could we
Andre, you disappeared.
Oops. Yep. Yep. I think we have a connection issue. Yeah. But
Well, I think we have a little technical problem. I cannot hear Andre. Could you hear also? Professor Stefanos?
Yeah, no, but I can finalize because we have done that presentation together, so it's all right if Andre is not with us. So so the takeaway message is that the water security is a key, but it's a complex situation, as we mentioned already. It comes out of many factors that all of you know quite well, and we need a better understanding and common language between the practitioners and the experts, as we mentioned from this kind of sample study we had. And the water security in the end calls for the nexus approach that we all try to achieve, and cannot be achieved through the water sector, because many people, understand that people, okay, they're working with water, these are the water guys. It's not like that. You need also agriculture, you need industry, you need environmentalists to be there. And as in the previous session mentioned, we need an interdisciplinary approach. And we think that the COVID could be a trigger for some better situation and more improvement out of this. So the crisis would become opportunity in the end. And that's the final. I think the next slide is just for the emailing, but of course you can. I would be glad just to communicate further with any kind of the audience. Yeah, that's all. So I think we can take out the presentation now, and we can have the talk. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Xenarios. Thank you, Dr. Verli. I think technicalities of these online meetings are not always fit, but this is okay. We can survive with that. This presentation showed us, again, these challenges for some. We repeat, time to repeat many times, but COVID-19 is just a magnifier. It is expressing in a stronger way what is in the DNA, in the structure, be in Central Asia, be somewhere else. We saw, you say it also in French, is an exhauster of fire of flavor, in the sense of inequalities. So this is a reality there. But also the figures you presented are very interesting in the trends, in the challenges in the region. And your final word is not only a water gentleman and ladies issue, is a teamwork from the economic side, from the energy side, from different side of the outside of the water box, or outside of the aquarium, if I can say like that. This being said, solutions can only be from systemic nature, and this is very important, and this is why we have such a panel today. And it's also hello. This is also reflecting the SDG structure. The SDG structure is SDG 6. Is pivotal to achieve the other SDG. We can say the same for energy, but in that case, we are speaking about water, and I think this is a very central understanding for the governments and from everybody on the table, this interlinkage between the SDG. So let me now name the panel we have, because this is the most important item moment on the to present everybody. So we have, of course, Mrs. Bonjuc, head of the regional program, the World Bank in Central Asia. We have Johannes Stembeck, head of the cooperation of the European Union in Nur Sultan. We have Rubis Shamele, program director, regional water environmental team leader at USAID. And we have also Dr. Serik Ozak-Galiev, from the assistant professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy of the Nazarbayev University. And last but not least, Martin Krasnay, scientific director at the Center for Central Asia Research Center of the Corvinus University in Budapest. So this is the team. It's reflecting all from the academic, from the donors' perspective, and of course from the governmental perspective. We should have also among us Sultan Haimzoda, head of the Executive Office of the International Fund for Saving RLC. I don't know with all the technicalities if we'll be able to join us. I wish so, because it's also a very central aspect of the regional cooperation. So first, let me start with the World Bank. So just also to make it clear, we try to have different aspects of the nexus, but different aspects of the players, and everyone has, of course, his own cards to play. This is very important in that. So let's start with the World Bank. So Lilia Bonjuc is the World Bank director from Central Asia since 4 years. You have been previously a country manager of Macedonia for the World Bank, and manager in operations and policy and country services. You also be involved in the designing of the World Bank cooperation in Central Asia strategy. And you have a long history at the World Bank, more than 25 years. And before that, you have been Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Moldova. So it's a long history. You have a lot probably to say in the region. So in this context, water is, of course, a key critical need for the human being. I mean, for food, for drinking, for sanitation, for hygiene. And those elements are clearly key health determinants. They're also important for the economy, but they are key health determinants. So what I understand also is that agriculture is, of course, a key sector for food security, for economic resilience, for employment generation, and it is the largest water sector. Irrigation is also consuming a lot of energy, and not to mention, to make the link with water sanitation, access to reliable and affordable water and sanitation services is something, a key determinant as well of the wealth of the population. So World Bank is a key actor of the region since decades. And I would like to hear from you as a start in a few words how the World Bank is supporting the region in regards of the water sector in this element of context we addressed during this panel.
Yes,
please.
Thank you. And I'm really glad that I'm part of this panel today, because water is so important to the Central Asia region. And we just heard from the previous presentation how much the region can gain from better water usage. And actually the biggest sector that is the biggest user of water in Central Asia is agriculture. And agriculture is so critical to the Central Asian economies. It accounts for 10% of the region's GDP and 30% of its labor force. And in some countries, it's actually almost 30% of GDP and half of employment. So it's a really important sector. It is also critical for food security. if we look at the countries in Central Asia, in most countries, food accounts for 40–50% of total household expenditure. So it is agriculture is critical for food security. Agriculture is critical for the economies of Central Asia. Now, because this is a water panel, I will, in terms of the challenges that agriculture is facing today, I will just focus on two. One of them is crops and crop diversification, because today a lot of water is being used for crops like cotton and wheat. For example, in 2017, 90% of all water consumed in Uzbekistan in agriculture was used to produce cotton and wheat. And cotton and wheat at the same time generated 23% of gross agricultural output. So now 90% of water, 23% of the agricultural output. So you can see that the water productivity was not really good. The situation is changing significantly, and now Uzbekistan and other countries in the region are moving towards horticulture, moving towards livestock and value chain addition. And we can already see the initial improvements, because horticulture can generate from 3 to 5 times the output value per unit of water compared to cotton and wheat. And also it is a sector that generates significant jobs. We just finished an interesting report on jobs in agriculture in Uzbekistan, and it showed that horticulture can actually generate a significant number of new jobs, and the value chain, of course, if the shift to horticulture continues. And the second issue I wanted to mention in terms of the challenges is, of course, the water infrastructure and water management in irrigation. And this is an area that needs significant improvement, both from the institutional side, the way the water economy is managed, in terms of infrastructure and upgrading infrastructure, and using the more innovative methods of using water and saving water. And also from the point of view of policies and way of distributing the water and policies on water use. So there are, of course, other issues in agriculture which I'm not touching on, but they are not less important, like land policies, trade facilitation, food safety issues, adaptation to climate change, which is actually linked. So another point I would like to stress here is the transboundary considerations in Central Asia, because in Central Asia, water is a transboundary issue. We know that, and a lot can be done at the national level, but there are things that cannot be done at the national level and require cooperation between among the countries of Central Asia. Let's face it, many of the key reservoirs and canals in Central Asia either span or provide services across the borders, across international borders of these countries. So there is a need for coordinating a joint management of some key water infrastructure and decisions on water allocation. And it's a huge agenda. It's a difficult agenda, but countries need to up their game in this area. So I can say more, but I'll stop here at this point.
Thank you very much, Leah, for this very interesting talk. I think maybe one point, we spoke about an opportunity with the crisis of the COVID-19. How do you see this opportunity? Okay, they are threat, of course, but they are also opportunity. And how you see the opportunity in regard of the value chain, of the trade aspect, of the irrigation on water, or more general way with the World Bank engagement in the sector?
So in terms of the crisis, COVID-19 crisis has again confirmed the importance of investing in agriculture reform and investing in the way water is used for agriculture, but also for other purposes. The World Bank, starting from the pandemic, focused immediately on the relief efforts, and this included everything, health, social protection, and so on. And now it's also focused very much on resilient recovery and building back better. And building back better means also looking into issues of how can Central Asia ensure food security? How can Central Asia build a system of trade facilitation, build a system of making sure that there are good certification systems and mechanisms in place? How to make sure that there are barriers, that the barriers that currently exist for the export of food from Central Asia is taken into account, the bottlenecks are removed, and that Central Asia can actually export its products to other markets. And we've seen that food prices are actually starting to going up in the world, which is an opportunity for Central Asia to join regional and global food markets and build a more resilient economy as a result of that, and create more jobs. But also the pandemic has shown how important is pay attention to water supply, water sanitation, and hygiene. There were a lot of announcements by governments, by health authorities to use, proper hand washing and hygiene and everything. And imagine these people in rural areas which don't even have access to clean water, or many schools without clean and running water, and even hospitals without clean and running water. So these are the areas where more investments are needed. And we at the World Bank today are investing around 2 billion in agriculture, covering some of the areas that I mentioned before, and also about $500 million in irrigation and water resource management, and significant resources into water supply and sanitation, and in particular rural water supply and sanitation, which are lagging behind in terms of providing services to people. So water security has become even more important during the COVID-19 crisis. This crisis has shown the spotlight on the importance of paying more attention to water management, water investment in the water infrastructure, and setting the right policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think water security is a keyword, definitively. Transnational cooperation, joint cooperation is another very important keyword. And water security is one thing. An important aspect is energy security as well. So I would suggest now to go to the very important aspect of the water energy nexus. Energy is a part of the key factor or key determinant factor for the economy, and including also for agriculture, because a lot of water is pumped. And if I take Uzbekistan, one of the larger energy consumer is the water sector, because everything is pumped. And this is maybe less true in the upstream countries, but this is an important element. So we have here with us Ruby Chamaleh from the Regional Water and team from USAID with us. Welcome on the panel. You are involved since more than 8 years with USAID in various functions, also in the developing countries. You have been also involved in DC, in Washington DC. You're an environmentalist, and of the first background, you are a civil engineer. So you are also very touched with concrete things, and now I'm more looking at, as I say, on the energy side, because I know that USAID is a lot engaged on the energy, and electricity is, I would say, like water, is flowing without stop. So it's very difficult to stop, but it also needs to be stored, and either in water reservoirs or in batteries. Batteries is maybe at large scale is not a question today. Predictable supply, reliable, affordable supply is a key determinant, but regional cooperation as well. So I would like to hear from you. Again, what is USA doing with this program in terms of water energy nexus in the region, how it is supporting, and how the, well, I'll give you the word and then I will have some more questions. Hello?
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thank you. Do you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ambassador Guy. It's really great to be here with all my colleagues who are all working on the water and transboundary water issues in Central Asia. So this is a very important topic for us at USAID, and for decades the US government through USAID has been working on both water and energy programs in the region. And we've been focusing on capacity building of local water and energy experts, not only in their countries, but to build the network within the region. And of course, investing in enterprises that would work to increase the resilience in all sectors, with the focus on, of course, on the youth and women, and trying to integrate them in this sector. So just if we're talking about water and energy, these, especially in Central Asia, these two sectors cannot be disconnected. Because if we want to give an example of the water energy nexus and the importance of understanding the energy sector, if you want to address water issues and vice versa, I think Central Asia is a great example for that. So the core water challenge in Central Asia is the divide between upstream water rich but energy poor countries and downstream water poor but energy rich countries. And just to give some figures, that upstream rivers provide approximately 90% of water needed for agriculture. And that's for, yeah. And downstream countries possess almost 90% of the economically viable hydrocarbons in the region. So there's a lot of connection between the water and energy in Central Asia. So the reality of the Central Asian water sector is that the majority of countries are not self-sufficient, and all of them rely on external sources to fulfill their needs. There are a number of common challenges that are central to the context here, and we, through our programs, are trying to address. So, for example, increasing demand for electricity, and I'm now going to talk a little bit about the electricity and the energy sector. The increasing demand for electricity, the underdeveloped energy trade between the countries in Central Asia, the outdated and fragmented infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure in the region hasn't been rehabilitated or constructed since Soviet time, and now with the support of donors and the governments themselves, we are trying to change that. But there's a lot of outdated like electricity infrastructure, and I think the most important thing is the transboundary hydropower, because hydropower that is generated to in upstream countries depends on transboundary rivers that are core to the livelihood of the downstream countries. So that electricity that is generated through hydropower, and I think in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, over 90% of the electricity generated in those countries are generated by hydropower. Sorry, so the nature of the electricity generation in these countries would impact the agriculture and food security and water resources sectors in downstream countries. And of course, we have the climate change complications. So just for example, in Kazakhstan, some of the energy sector challenges are inefficient electricity allocation. Almost all capacity generation is in the north, but south has most of the need, and of course we have to talk about greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a lot of challenges in the energy and electricity sector. So our is focused on 4 common themes that are critical for the future of energy and electricity generation in the region. The first one is regional connectivity, and all our programs, and I think all of the other donors are working on regional connectivity, investing in energy market frameworks and regional infrastructure to enable better energy trade. And also the energy water nexus. That complex relationship between upstream and downstream countries is central to realize the region's important hydropower potential. And of course, the integration of renewable energy, active adaptation and diversification away from fossil fuels will help mitigate climate risks and also diversify the economies and improve energy security. So this is, in a nutshell, the challenges that we have and what USAID is doing in this regard. Over.
Yes, thank you very much. You are like in the old time of the radio communication with Over.
Yeah, I learned that during the past 6 months.
Well, thank you very much. I think what would be, we speak about building back better or recovering, taking the opportunity. What would be, in your opinion, recommendation or ways to make it better? Because again, we had a lot of a challenge which has been highlighted or even aggravated by the 2-day crisis. How do you make it, you would, in your opinion, do it better in the future, or advising for doing it better?
Yeah. So we're all highlighting the challenges and the obstacles that we might face in the future, from transboundary tension to increasing demand to climate change to outdated frameworks. However, I think it's also important to highlight the opportunities out there. So despite the many challenges, there are a lot of opportunities out there in the region that we as a donor community should capitalize on and work together to help utilize these opportunities. So one thing that we can work on, again, in the energy sector or in the energy water nexus, is the trust in government. So I think diversification of energy resources and introducing transparency in the sector will help improve trust in governments to provide sustainable economic opportunities to their citizens, and also increased access to reliable energy across Central Asia will both improve people's livelihoods and increase economic opportunities at all levels of consumption. Again, I think enabling the business environment, access to energy is crucial to creating a supportive environment for businesses to thrive. If the region is not attractive for investors to come here, if the electricity sector or the energy sector is not attractive for investors, then that would kind of deter them. So I think enabling the business environment would also help in the future. And again, as everyone is saying, I think investing in building back better. I really like this terminology, and I think that the focusing on the water energy nexus and water energy and food security nexus through the economic lens, because however we try to explain the problems and the solutions, if we don't have evidence that this is economically better for all countries involved, and it is. It's a win-win for everyone when we're talking about the water, energy, food security nexus in the region. And the only way to do that is to highlight and emphasize the economic benefits of cooperation. And that's what we're doing under our New Water project, is to basically highlight by data that working together, cooperating, talking to each other, trying to address all the challenges of the past and creating the opportunities for the future is definitely a win-win for everyone involved in water and energy in the region. And again, water and energy are cross-cutting. They're the drivers of economic growth in the region. So yeah, that's something that would enhance the resilience in the face of current and future crises.
Thank you very much. I think once again another very important aspect of the cooperation, working together across the sectors. I mean, we say water, food, water, energy, but of course across the border. And I think yes, this is a cooperation. From cooperation, you need trust to cooperate, but also generate more benefit. And this is a very strong aspect. And to look at the economic side, and I think this is one of the main purpose of this panel, is to look from that angle, not only from each of the sector of the water sector. Now, a cooperation. Before I switch to the next panelist, I would like to remind the audience that there is a possibility to ask questions on the Q&A module. And I don't see anything so far in that line. It would be good also to state your question there, so we can pick up them and of course address them in the next phase of the panel. Now, cooperation. I think European Union is just a piece of art in terms of cooperation, because it's also already check and balance and arranging different interests, different states, different member states, and it's a very complex mechanism. Well, Switzerland is not bad in that regard, but this logic is quite complex and could be an example for Central Asia. So one of the key aspect of the policy of the European Union is circular economy, and in that sense, well, I'm a chemical engineer by education, so I understand what means efficient use of material, reuse of material, which actually reduce the need for raw material, and of course reduce the pollution also as well. Johannes Madsen is the head of cooperation of the European Union in Republic of Kazakhstan, and has been previously also head of cooperation of EU delegation in Kyrgyzstan. So we are very well familiar with the region. We were there between 2013 and 17. And before that, you have different functions at the World Bank, especially at the EU audit, the Court of Auditors of the EU. Well, I would like to also to hear from you what is the commitment of the European Union in regard of the Green Deal, in regard of what is transferable in the region, and having a look of course of this perspective of the nexus and economic aspect of the nexus. Please, Johannes, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Very good, thank you. Yes, as you rightly point out when you started, the European Union is kind of a different animal in many ways, with its 27 sovereign member states, nation states. But I think one of the things that we have learned from the COVID-19 crisis is that effective solutions are sort of collective solutions, and we have the advantage of already having the institutions to work effectively together, and this is what we're benefiting from now. allow me to, I prepared a speech for this, I have to say, because of the complexity of the body I represent, because of the many issues that are relevant when it comes to water resource management, and the fact that what has already been emphasized by some of the other speakers, that you need an integral approach. The Nexus approach is exactly that. You cannot effectively address problems by focusing narrowly on one sector. But first of all, allow me to say that I'm very honored and pleased to be part of this distinguished panel. I will start by saying a few words about how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world and the EU's perspective on a number of things, including today's topic, transboundary water management. The post-COVID-19 economic recovery and the transition to a sustainable and socially just, resilient and climate neutral economy can and should go hand in hand. Over the next 2 years, governments around the world will seek to spend around 10 trillion euros, which are in principle borrowed from future generations. The choices we make today will therefore define tomorrow's future. This is why the recovery plans should be designed as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to, as it has been said several times already, build back better and invest in an economy of the 21st century and not in an obsolete carbon-based economy as we had in the past century. In July 2020, the EU leaders agreed on an overall EU budget for the next 7 years and an extraordinary recovery effort known as the Next Generation EU. The 750 billion euro package is intended to help the EU to rebuild after the COVID-19 pandemic and will support investment in the green and digital transitions. This comes on top of sizable stimulus and recovery packages at national level. In her recent State of the Union address, our President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, presented her vision for Europe to emerge stronger from the pandemic and lead the way towards a new vitality. With the Next Generation EU, Europe has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make change happen by design. The EU has a vision, a concrete plan on how to make it a reality, and the investment needed to implement this plan. And the EU Green Deal will be the main vehicle to make Europe greener and more resilient. The EU's Green Deal priority, which engages the private sector and seeks to decarbonize the energy sector, to increase energy efficiency and promote renewables, features prominently in the region. At the same time, the new EU strategy on Central Asia continues to prioritize issues related to water management and a coordinated approach to environment-related issues. In line with the EU strategy on Central Asia, we continue our partnership to build resilience in the region, taking into account the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the spring of 2020, the European Union and its member states mobilized a hefty 23 billion euro Team Europe solidarity package of assistance. Around 124 million from this package has been dedicated to Central Asia. In July 2020, allow me to also mention that we were able to launch a comprehensive regional program, the EU Central Asia COVID-19 Crisis Response Program, the CACCR, which gives priority to the needs of Kazakhstan. To implement this program, the European Union teamed up with the World Health Organization, an organization which we believe has the first-class experience needed when it comes to managing pandemics around the globe, and also has specialist knowledge about Central Asia. As you know, the countries of Central Asia are heavily interdependent when it comes to the environment, energy, and water resources. This is due to geography as well as the existing infrastructure, which Ruby talked about. In order to tackle challenges such as, one, the increasing competing demand for water between the Central Asian states, two, the insufficient cooperation between the Central Asian countries in managing the shared water resources, and three, the lack of institutional capacity to translate policies into investments to upgrade the existing infrastructure, there is a need to find transboundary solutions. So this brings me to the key message of this speech. The water sector will play an essential role in the post-COVID-19 recovery. The current crisis clearly demonstrates our dependence on the water sector for sanitation and hygiene as a key factor to prevent and fight infectious diseases. Many countries have already started discussions on post-COVID-19 recovery plans and measures to support people and economies. Of course, we need time. It will take time, and we need time to reflect and draw lessons from the current situation to build our resilience and hopefully avoid or at least mitigate future crises as much as possible. The EU is ready to share our experiences and to facilitate integration of best practices into the water sector reforms in Central Asia to attain the sustainable management of the region's water resources, including transboundary waters. Let me mention some of the key instruments and approaches that we need to promote further in order to employ the full potential of the region. First of all, strict adherence to the guiding principle of integrated water resource management will be key in achieving the ambitions of the Sustainable Development Goals. The EU member states continue to follow coordinated frameworks for securing good ecological status of their water resources. One of the most important and advanced instruments is the European Union's Water Framework Directive. It provides guidance not only to the its own member states, but also helps many more partner countries shape their water policies. The recent fitness check exercise under the directive confirmed its relevance and its important contribution to the protection of water bodies around Europe. The EU assists countries in Central Asia to adopt European approaches in managing their natural resources, including in the water sector, through a dedicated project on water and environment cooperation, the acronym WECOOP, and the cooperation at the intergovernmental level through the so-called EU Central Asia Working Group on Environment and Climate Change. The water secure and sustainable recovery could also depend, would and will also depend on the coordination of different sectors where water plays a pivotal role. The water, food, energy ecosystem nexus, as already mentioned, helps to increase policy coherence and synergy between water, agriculture, energy, and land management sectors. The nexus approach to managing interlinked resources emerged as a response by increasing efficiency, reducing trade-offs, building synergies, and improving governance while protecting ecosystems. The EU supports the adoption of the nexus approach at the regional and national levels in Central Asia through a dedicated project on the Nexus Dialogue implemented by the Central Asian Regional Environmental Center, CAREC. To promote intersectoral cooperation, the EU also supports the EU Water Initiative policy dialogues on integrated water resource management in countries of Central Asia, facilitated by the UN Economic Commission on Europe, UNECE, and the OECD. To prevent negative impacts of COVID-19 on meeting SDG 6 targets in Central Asia and ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, we need to support inter- and cross-sectoral dialogues to facilitate the link between health issues and water management. To this end, multilateral environmental agreements MEAs increasingly address water, health, and global change issues as a reaction to emerging infectious diseases and global pandemics. By strengthening their policy and institutional framework according to MEA standards and guidance, Central Asian countries make health a priority when elaborating their national water strategies. Adopting progressive, scientifically based water sanitation and health targets, along with their realistic implementation plans and attached funding, should be an immediate priority for all countries. Equitable access to wash should be ensured to all populations, including the most vulnerable and marginalized groups. To ensure a green recovery, it's also crucial to secure more investments in the water sector. The economic crisis caused by the pandemic should not be a reason to cut back investments in the water sector. On the contrary, we should understand that investing in water pays off. Several of the speakers have already emphasized this. The water sector sustains the economic benefits of nature's ecosystems services, such as climate regulation, water purification, regulation of disease and drought, flood mitigation, and many more. It makes water supply and treatment systems more resilient to crises, such as the current COVID-19 pandemic, by enabling equitable access to safe fresh water for basic hygiene, protecting biodiversity and water ecosystems that can act as a natural buffer against the spread of viruses, and taking into account health at each level of water management. Good water management reduces the burden on the health sector by improving water management practices, which minimizes the transfer of hidden costs of the public health sector. Before I conclude, let me say that the unprecedented scale of the current challenge clearly demonstrates that we all need to work together, collaborate more effectively, and remain committed to our goal of healthy people on a healthy planet. Within the framework of its development cooperation, which since 2014 has amounted to more than €1 billion for Central Asia, the EU promotes sustainable economic development and a more rational use of natural resources. The EU has 15 ongoing regional programs covering the sustainable use of water, energy, environment, and, as mentioned, the water, food, energy nexus for a total amount of about €100 million. Through projects such as WeCoop, CAWEB, which we're implementing in cooperation with the World Bank and the Swiss Development Corporation, and Nexus, the EU works together with its Central Asian partners to enhance national environmental, climate change, and water policies, to approximate them to EU standards, as well as to promote informed green investments in the relevant sectors to build a resilient economy to the benefit of the people of the region. In conclusion, I would like to express the wish that we will all stay healthy and that we will be able to continue to work together towards achieving the SDGs and making our planet a better place for future generations and ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. I think you brought a very complex and large pictures of all the tools of the European Union in the region. I think it's a very in a way, it's a picture also of the EU, a very complex and comprehensive answer. So thank you very much. I think you addressed also most of the question I would have to ask you. Maybe we can have a question from the audience at a later stage. Now let me move to the next, I would say, topics, which is also a very important one, is these economic links. I mean, this how it is working together, how we can look from the economic lens, I would say water as a fuel, if I can say like that, for the economy of the region. And like in our bodies, the water is a great integration factor. It is transporting material, it is purifying, but it's also absolutely the fuel of our body. And in that regard, water is absolutely a key economic determinant. And for the recovery. And in this regard, the Corvinus University has made some research work, or is about to launch some research work on the importance of the water sector in the economic perspective, and not only just reinvigorate the water sector, but going beyond that, and going beyond also the just investment, but look at it in a more systemic way, how is water is taking place, and how the opportunities should be used. And at this stage, I will introduce again Martin Krasnay, Scientific Director of the Center for Central Asia Research at the Corvinus University. He has been his field of research is economic, institutional, strategic aspect of the water energy resource in Central Asia, but also the influence of the gene of how you can say the institutional genes of the states involved, and what is the impact on the political transition. You come from a country like also others in this panel where it has been going through different challenges. You are sitting in the middle of Europa, in Central Europe, and we are somehow a bridge between the Western development and the Eastern development, at least in the historical part of you. You've also been in service in China, in Beijing. You have been ambassador for Hungary at the OSCE, so you have quite a broad pictures. And last but not least, you are graduated from the Moscow Institute of International Relations. So really a gentleman with a good card from Switzerland to different places. So I would like to hear from you. What is your field of research? What's your intent? What your understanding? And I know that we are now you're about to launch some research programs. And yes, please, I give you the floor and to express how your contribution and your institution is contributing to this discussion. Martin.
Thank you very much. We have heard that COVID rang an alarm bell that business as usual is not possible anymore. But if COVID is an alarm clock, then we can hear in the background the big bells of a cathedral. That's climate change. That's much longer and much more powerful. How to address such multiple challenges? Kicking the can down the road is hardly a good option. Increasing exports of energy and raw materials. It happened during past crisis, because demand for oil might never return to pre-COVID levels, at least to the study by British Petrol 2020. And the volatility of the fossil fuel market is driving investors towards economically stable industries. So water, and not oil and gas, is going to be the most important strategic resource of the region. And the crisis offers an opportunity for change. Central Asia could make the water sector a key driver of demand-driven recovery and long-term growth. And there are many advantages, as we heard: food security, job creation, social stability, clean drinking water, which would increase resilience to further pandemics, climate change adaptation, and I can continue. But there is one problem. The water sector of Central Asia has been badly underperformed during the last 3 decades. It has never become economically, financially sustainable. And not because economic, financial, and environmental considerations have never been properly integrated into water resources management. So the continuation of the comprehensive economic reforms addressing structural problems, institutional weaknesses of the economies are a sine qua non for making the water sector sustainable. The private sector needs a better business climate. The government sector needs transparency and accountability to improve the resource allocation. The cooperative sector needs supportive fiscal policy, stable resource regulatory environment to ensure profitability. And of course, action costs money. According to a recent study by the Karak Institute, at least $25 billion is needed for upgrading infrastructure. And there are opportunities. There are profound changes in the world economy. Till September this year, $4 trillion were created by central banks. There's low inflation, and the state, in every country, the state has become the capital allocator in chief. So this is an opportunity, but there are risks also. Several Central Asian countries have very high levels of debt and persistently high inflation. And of course, upstream countries have huge hydropower reserves, but they don't have the economic and financial capacity to build the multi-year regulating capacity which is needed to meet the challenges of climate change. And the decisions of upstream countries on water affect the strategic interest of downstream countries. So it is of strategic importance to replace resource competition with cooperation. And needless to remind, we just heard the European Union think that this was the first step in Europe towards integration, replacing resource competition with cooperation. And regional cooperation should go beyond a simple water and energy consortium, that is timely water releases in exchange for import of summer electricity. Integrated water resource management at the regional level makes much more sense than integrated water resource management at the national level. A water and energy consortium should benefit all sectors of the economy, directly or indirectly linked to water. And a well-designed economic framework for regional water resources management would trigger a virtuous circle. Improving regional cooperation would generate pressure for economic reforms at home. And economic reforms, in turn, would facilitate better cooperation at the regional level. And the countries should also see the geopolitical and geoeconomic changes which are going on, like the move towards shorter and more secure supply chain, which might change the Belt and Road initiatives. So perhaps less investment in roads, railroads, and pipelines, and more into water infrastructure might make sense. Climate change is a threat, but it's also an opportunity. A credible regional plan on climate action and green recovery would make Central Asia eligible for significant international assistance. Corvinus University, with the support of the Blue Peace Central Asia, is leading a program which involves Central Asian researchers, decision makers, practitioners. And the aim of this program is to produce recommendations on how to put the water sector of the region on a path towards sustainability. The objective is to elaborate recommendations for ambitious, still realistic, and bankable plans to put the water sector of the region on a sustainable path by integrating economic, financial, and environmental considerations into its management. High-level political will in the region exists to cooperate. Experts need to come up with solutions that can achieve consensus and drive change. Thank you.
Very much, Martin, for this interesting talk. How you say what should be the main strategic decisions in terms of economy for the region, for the leaders, or your recommendation to better integrate or to quicker recover from the crisis?
Well, as I said, making the water sector the main driver offers one huge advantage, and the stability. Now we are in a period, because of COVID, because of climate change, because of the collapsing of the old model of globalization, where volatility becomes the biggest challenge for all the economic decision makers. If you look at the recent reports by the big investment banks, they doubled their income during the COVID period because of speculation. So the water sector offers a very important advantage of stability. It creates a capacity within the country. it improves food security, it improves, it gives jobs, and it's also strengthens regional stability. So I think there are very important reasons for focusing on the water sector as part of any recovery strategy of any country in the region.
For this additional comment. Now let me switch to our next panelist, Dr. Serik Orazgaliev. Is that correct? Sorry for not being very clear with your name. You are assistant professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy at Nazarbayev University, and you have also been a visiting professor at the Lim Year School of Public Policy in Singapore, as well as civil servant in the Parliament of Kazakhstan. Well, you heard a lot of international people expressing their opinions, solutions, proposals, I don't know, suggestions, and we heard clearly that also water sector is a key input factor for labor-intensive sector in the region for economic development. And last but not least, we also heard the importance of sound policies for securing investment, attracting private sector, and giving a certain stability to develop the investment which are needed. So could you tell us, as an academician in the public policy sector, what is your contribution in your research work? What is your recommendation?
Hello.
Sorry, I don't know. Have you heard the question? Maybe we can.
I can hear the dog barking, but I don't hear the moderator. But
yeah. If you go ahead, because I think there's a problem with that. Yeah, if you heard the question, probably you can go through, and probably the one can rejoin.
Shall we wait for moderator to rejoin us?
Probably you can respond if you want to, and then we will see how to bring him back.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thank you, Stefanos, and it's my pleasure to participate in this amazing panel of experts. And I think what I will do is I will try to present from a political economy perspective and public policy perspective, and try to highlight the points that have not been mentioned today. So in relation to the COVID-19 crisis, and of course since it's a socio-economic challenge, what kind of challenges this situation brings to the labor market. We talked a lot about the agricultural sector today, and of course it's labor intensive, but looking from another perspective, I think I want to talk a little bit more about small and medium enterprises. Because if we look across countries, clearly due to their vulnerability, for obvious reasons, developing countries will bear enormous costs from this crisis. And Central Asian countries are not an exception, they're all developing countries. And in a similar way, if we look across industries and sectors, it is small and medium enterprises that are going to be suffering by far the most from the current situation. So, for example, before the pandemic, small and medium enterprises contributed almost 1/3 of the country's GDP. Here I'm talking about Kazakhstan, and if we look at the numbers, it's about 30% of GDP. And by some estimates, before the pandemic started, small and medium enterprises in Kazakhstan employed more than 3 million people. So it is about 36% of working population in Kazakhstan. So I think talking about the challenges to the labor market, I think addressing this issue of vulnerability of small and medium enterprises. And of course, it is directly relevant to agriculture because first of all, if we cut across small and medium enterprises, then 41% of them are in trade and commerce and services sector. But the second largest sector in SMEs is agriculture. So about 22% of SMEs in Kazakhstan are in agricultural sector. So here again, we see why this is important. Next point is that another major challenge related to labor market that Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries face is increasing unemployment. So in Kazakhstan, the government announced projected cuts in the public sector, and it's needless to say that in all other public sectors, the unemployment is and will be in the near future on the rise. And of course, to address this high structural unemployment, countries in the Central Asian region should pursue comprehensive strategies on where to redirect educational programs for all ages or retrain specialists so that they best serve the needs of the respective national economies. But I think there are some opportunities as well that could be mentioned here is that due to the crisis, I think the rural outmigration slowed down, and we could see this across all Central Asian countries. So this is an opportunity for Central Asian countries to pay attention to the needs of the agricultural sector. It's not only helping with the subsidies and other access to credit and finances, but also to improve infrastructure and improve connectivity, so that to ensure access of agricultural sector producers to world markets, or at least to the regional markets. This is briefly what I had to say, and to add to what my colleagues already said.
I have to admit that I lost a little bit of your intervention because I was ejected in the system. Maybe Professor Scenarios, you can react on this because I didn't hear the whole thing.
Yeah. Thanks. I think we were fine because the question was received properly from Serik, and the emphasis was on the small medium enterprises and the need for the reorientation on the labor, some trainings, especially for Kazakhstan, that's very much related to agriculture. So I think that was a good point taken in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And in terms of maybe, pardon me if I repeat a few things, but because I didn't hear it before. what you see as opportunities in the region in regard of what you said in terms of cooperation. You mentioned the migration, you mentioned maybe trade. What you see opportunities in terms of regional policies in your field?
Yeah, I think this is the responses to the COVID crisis, I think, in itself present opportunities. And first of all, I think it presents opportunities for governments in Central Asia for capacity building, because capacity is always important, but even more so in times of crisis. And this includes improving governance, introducing meritocracy principles in building civil service, and of course, anti-corruption reforms across all sectors. And it includes as well creating conditions that make doing business easier. And in the conditions of the pandemic, capacity building at the local level is of paramount importance, because in many instances, you need to decentralize, you need to move decision-making to the local areas, because local agencies have to take action in these difficult circumstances. And sometimes there is urgency, and they need to mobilize resources. So capacity building, I think, here is of paramount importance. But in terms of responses of Central Asian governments to COVID crisis, I think we can categorize in terms of immediate responses and then more long-term strategies. So here, from the public policy perspective, I think if we try to look at the examples, I think one example is a stimulus package that Kazakh government introduced starting from May 2020. And it was reported that the stimulus package equal to about 9% of the country's GDP and helping 4.5 million people who lost income due to the pressures of the pandemic, and they supported them with the wages. And additionally, the government made extra payments to medical people who work in the health services, in the police, and staff focused on COVID-19 prevention and treatment. And speaking of the region overall, I think the self-employed of Central Asia are estimated about 25%, and it's make up the region's a huge informal economy. And I think support towards this self-employed, I think, would be one of the, or should be one of the priority areas for government. And briefly, in terms of long-term strategies, again, from the public policy perspective, I think it was already mentioned, but I think it's worth emphasizing that diversification is important for all Central Asian countries because they're all commodity export dependent countries, and they need to diversify towards services, towards manufacturing, renewable energy, developing innovative agriculture, and supporting small and medium exercises. And of course, Central Asian economies can be, at the moment, they can be characterized as undiversified, and they rely heavily on commodity exports, and some of them rely on remittances. And this, of course, will be changing in the light of the changing falling oil prices and in the light of the global pandemic. And I think in general, economic concentration in the extractive industries means that the region is highly vulnerable. So diversification here is something that needs to be addressed by across all 5 Central Asian countries.
Much for, I think, this very wise observation, I would say. Professor Xenarios, I think you tried to connect Sultan Haimzoda. What is about the situation on that line?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm still trying. So I hope that we the very last minute. I hope that we manage to have him here. It still makes a large effort to. There's some problem with connectivity. Is in the Tajikistan, I guess, and some problem getting connected. So we may go ahead, and if he will manage to join, for sure, we'll have him here.
Okay, so I wish it is possible, because it would be a very big honor to have him on board such an important function. and we could arrange it yesterday. It was very short notice, and I hope that it could materialize. Now, if I look basically at the Q&A function, there is a questions by Bota Sharipova, which is asking well, this is actually to all speakers of us. You can see the question. I think Ruby is one question for you, if I'm not mistaken. Can you pick up this question?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bota, for the question. And your question says, dear Ruby, you mentioned that trust of people to the government is one of the most important factors for further recovery in Central Asia. May I ask why that was highlighted? So we were talking about strengthen the Central Asia economy's resilience to the current and future crisis. That was the question that I was responding to. And trust in governments that provide sustainable and inclusive economic opportunities for their citizens and constant energy and water resources supply will lead to this economic resilience to current and future crisis that I was addressing in the question. And when a government is able to support its citizens by providing these uninterrupted, crucial and key services and addressing the needs of its people, that means that a lot of factors has been included, such as citizen participation, transparency, data-based decision-making. These are all aspects that governments can adopt at this stage to both build back better and strengthen resilience to current and future crises. So with all the challenges that the region is facing right now, including COVID and climate change and many other challenges, I think that trust between people and their governments could be built with the inclusion of people in decision-making in those areas. When we're talking about transboundary water resources, you need to have that connection, that those bridges built, so that we would get the best result out of this collaboration. Also, I think when we say the word trust, it's not only trust among the government and its people and vice versa, but also trust among all governments in Central Asia. When we're able to see collaboration, when all of these governments are seeing that energy and water resources are being addressed through an economic lens that ensures better or more economic prosperity for everyone, the trust between those governments increase. And again, I just want to emphasize on the importance of these two sectors and importance of data transparency and citizen participation to help build that trust, again, both between the government and its people and between all the governments of Central Asia. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you very much. There is another question which actually to all of us, I mean, pinpointed by Professor Xenarios, is how can practitioners, scientists, policymakers in Central Asia may come to compromise to effective regulation on water security. Well, I don't have any, it's not dedicated to any precisely of us, but
sorry, this was a question actually, sorry, raised by the audience, but I transferred that to the Q&As.
I know that.
I can try.
Please, maybe Lilia, start on this.
Yes, I can try to answer it. Look, in fact, a lot depends on the governments and citizens of Central Asia in terms of coming together and discussing the issues and finding solutions and sticking to these solutions. We as development partners, as bilateral donors, researchers and scientists, we can help the process. We can help the process with analytics. We can help the process with data, with organizing discussions and brainstormings and debates, putting in place platforms for this type of discussions to take place. But everything is in the hands of the governments and citizens of Central Asia. We can facilitate that, but they have to do the job. So that's my answer.
But I might add one thing. I agree completely with the World Bank director on this. But I would like to add also that policy dialogue can also be helpful. We have a regional, I mentioned this working group on environment, water and climate change that the EU has with the 5 Central Asian countries. That is one way of sort of raising the stake of these issues related to environment, climate change and water, and inspire changes to legal frameworks, and link them also to discussions of practical solutions. So how do you do it in, say, the EU when you introduce new legislation? How do you ensure that it becomes effective? So it's another way, but as you say, of course, the power to change things on the ground lies with the governments and of course the people. And here it's important to remember, which several of you also have mentioned, that in order to improve things, you need investments, you need hardware to improve things, and that goes for water, but also for the environment and climate change. If you really want to change things on the ground, it requires investments.
Yes, maybe I'm just add that.
May I add one thing to? I just want to say that I like the intervention from Nazarbayev University, Serik, if I may, intervention. First of all, the emphasis on support for SMEs as part of ensuring the recovery. I think it's spot on. The new jobs that have to be created will have to come from the private sector. It's a mean or a way to ensure economic empowerment of those with the greatest needs, and fund and potentially also, strengthening the basis for taxation for local authorities. And the other thing he mentioned brings me again to the local authorities: decentralization. With decentralization offers solutions to many of the challenges we have, and this includes also managing of utility companies, water companies. Local authorities need to be involved in that, and local authorities are better than central authorities. Why? Because the lines of accountability are shorter, and those who are responsible will have to look into the eyes of those who are benefited from the services. And that again is also the way of tackling corruption. It's a lot easier to collect the bribe if you're sitting 1,000 kilometers away than if you have to face the person who is paying the bribe. So again, the short lines of accountability is definitely a good thing. And I'm happy to say that the Kazakh government is serious about this. It's in their long-term strategies, but of course they have a careful and very incremental approach for good reasons. But it's important that there is progress on this, I think, also when it comes to managing water resources. Over.
Thank you. I was giving the word to Martin, and then please, Martin.
Thank you. I think water security at the regional level means that governments are taking obligations, legal obligations, and create the necessary institutions to ensure the environmentally and economically responsible management of water resources by every country, as they depend on each other. And that's very important that we create the economic basis for that. You take a obligation, legal obligation, an international legal obligation, bilateral legal obligation, if it's in your economic interest. I think it's very important that we with this program we clarify the profound long-term economic interest of every country, which would then help the partners like IFAS. Unfortunately, Sultan is not with us. Help IFAS to modernize the legal and institutional frameworks for cooperation, which would then be the very important guarantors of water security at the regional level.
Martin, I think you had a very important point, and actually you're right. It's a pity that Sultan Arinzola is not with us. I hope that we have another occasion to also to exchange with him. I would like also to give now the word to Dr. Ozar Kaliev on this important question. Turn on your microphone, please.
Okay, thank you. I think my colleagues made some good points and highlighted good points in addressing this question. But I think something that, so we talked a lot about water security, but I think I'd like to make a point about a related issue that is, of course, related to water security, which is food security. And agriculture is a sector that can be studied both under the water and food security, but the current crisis of COVID-19 is multiplied the risks and threats, especially for fragile economies of Central Asia. And I think it will continue to strain these areas, especially in the areas that rely on agriculture. And the agriculture and its supply chains are no different to others, but in these circumstances, they are even more vulnerable. And Central Asia is in the middle of rapidly rising food prices around the world. And of course, it requires strong, proportionate, and efficient measures to address these food security issues. And of course, governments need to prevent future disruptions in food supplies. So countries, some countries around the world impose restrictions on exports, especially some of the, we've seen recently countries, members of the Eurasian Economic Union, they introduced such measures on the restrictions of exports for certain food products because of the disruptions caused by the pandemic. And so domestic food prices spiked up, and we now seeing increases in the prices of food supply. So I think also with regards to labor-intensive sectors such as agriculture, we think that this is an issue that countries need to address and be ready to address because the food security will remain an important issue of paramount importance, especially for areas that are in the Aral Sea basin.
Thank you very much for these answers. I think we see that it's a very complex issues, and there are many sides of it. I mean, you mentioned SMEs as we can research. I mean, addressing the smart solutions developed by the private sector, the importance of that, and the good practices which are at the small level that could also be magnified at a larger level. This is one thing very important. Another aspect was what Lilia mentioned at the very beginning is the importance that the solution has to be found by the state and the government itself in a trust. And I think one thing maybe us as international is not easy to understand is what are the critical cultural value for water in the region, how it can be translated into business agreement, cooperation, and maybe we have some views that are not maybe the views of the region. And most of us in this panel, we are not from the region, and maybe has some humility how to address this very important aspect. I had one day a discussion on a panel where in Egypt, not here, and a lady told us clearly, yes, water, the Nile River is like just God for us, and is essential things. And it's driving all the mechanism of negotiation from that point. And I think here there are different, we have two big rivers, Sir Daria, Amur Daria, and the cultural space is maybe not the same. And it is very important, I think, also in this aspect of considering the economy, considering also in which fertile, cultural fertile ground we are. So it's more, maybe less business oriented, but also important because the business is also made with people, and negotiation is also made with people. Well, I'm turning again to Professor Xenarius. No news from Sultan.
I mean, we tried many times. So it was there's a difficulty with just joining this. Is a technical issue, it seems so. So it's like there was just a question in the Q&A, but I cannot see even myself now, that was raised from the audience about how to make water security operational.
That was one of this question, but I think we already addressed it to some extent.
Yes.
And there was another question which was also raised, is how our institutions, I mean, development partners and others, and bilateral donors, long-term strategy is impacted by COVID-19. That's a question I saw also in the file. Maybe we have just 8 minutes for us, so I would like to have a less than 90-second statement on that for each of you before I make a closing of this session. Thank you very much. I start with again with Lilia, please.
Just to be clear, the question is how we're going to adjust our long-term strategies, or also on the operationalization?
Long-term strategy.
Long-term strategy. Okay. So look, I think the COVID crisis has already impacted our strategies, is already impacting our strategies and how we see some of the important areas of emerging. In terms of water issues, what is going to definitely affect our institutions' program going forward is how to help countries improve efficiency of water use, including for not only for agriculture, we're already investing quite heavily and will continue investing, including investing in irrigation and bringing know-how and modernizing and building capacity. But water and sanitation and hygiene, this has become so important as the crisis has shown. So this is one area where probably more attention will be paid in the future. Also linked to this is the whole water of food security and transboundary trade facilitation and cooperation in Central Asia, enabling better trade in Central Asia, within Central Asia, which will improve food security, but also creating the conditions for Asia to export its agricultural products abroad, and this is trade facilitation. This is, you know, some of the missing maybe infrastructure. And here I would like to add definitely a new item on our agenda, which we are going to pursue in the future, is the whole One Health agenda. It is the nexus of animal health and human health, and the whole system of monitoring and certification, and linked to environment, and linked to agriculture, linked to upgrading the health systems, linked to exports, and people's travel, everything else. So this is definitely one of the new areas we will focus going forward, and we'll continue paying and working with other partners together on the whole water agenda in Central Asia. I'll stop.
Very much, Johannes, in the fast way.
Yes, it's a big issue, and again, I cannot look into the crystal ball on behalf of the EU. I don't think anyone could do that. But what I can see, there are some basic principles that's going to steer, I think, the EU's approach in all sectors, including the water sector, and that's basically promotion of common rules, internationally recognized common rules, and enforcement of those rules through, basically the multilateral systems, and through that also promoting a level playing field for businesses, and that with that I also refer to trade. So if we want to promote green economies, that also implies that we need to set higher industrial standards, which means that we cannot procure old technology in this pursuit of a green economy. So standards must be set higher, they must be enforced, and it must enable those businesses who meet the challenge of meeting those standards. So that's just in a few words how I see the future from the EU side. That's just some highlights. Over.
Thank you very much. Ruby, please.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a very good question, and we definitely cannot discuss near-term development or even long-term development opportunities and challenges without discussing the pandemic's impacts. In the past 8 months now, we've seen how all donor-funded projects, or even projects implemented by the government, have been impacted. And in terms of water, because water is cross-cutting, there will be an impact on food and water security, livelihoods, and nutrition, all related to COVID-19. So the US government, through USAID, pledged a total of $1.3 billion globally to address for COVID response. But in terms of our programs in the region that are targeting the water sector, I think that the main lesson learned from the past 8 months, and the main lesson learned to move forward, is to be adaptive and to adapt our programs to current and sudden changes. I think the goal by itself is not going to change, but how we get to that goal will definitely change in the near term, and who knows if it's going to be a long-term thing or not. But now we have COVID-19, but also climate change has a bigger impact on this region and on the whole world. So we don't know what the future is holding for us in that aspect. So I think donor-funded programs should be adaptive and should always have that element of adapting the way forward, or the implementation mechanisms to whatever crisis come along. I think also one more thing that was highlighted during this pandemic, and something that we would integrate in our future programmings and current programming, is the importance of technology in our daily lives, and citizen participation, transparency, and working together as one entity. Times of crisis like COVID, and I'm pretty sure in the future, like when we have the climate change impact more evident, working together as one is going to be the only way forward. And utilizing technology is going to be the backbone of how we implement our donor-funded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to be very unpolite and not to give the word to everybody because I have only 50 seconds for us. So I would like to thank very much all our panelists to have dedicated their time and energy and brain to answer these very important questions. So thank you for all of you. Thank you for the audience also, which was present, some 60 people if I look at the figures. And the last word will be trust for investment, trust for between countries, between sectors, between peoples, and listen to the voice of water, which is flowing and giving you a chance to develop the things. So the last 2 seconds is the noise of water.